moment as our media technician at Ratcliffe College, and I'm just going to run through a few questions if that's okay.
You're quite fortunate here at Ratcliffe because actually you have lots of resources available to you. The audio equipment, for example, some of the equipment that you have access to here is actually used in the professional industry. So you know really should be pleased with that. It means that you're able to then hone your skills to a much higher quality than a lot of other schools would be able to. So an example of that would be the Rode NTG2 shotgun mic. That's hard to say. That's actually used in mainstream industry as a on-location microphone, and they would also take that into something like a Zoom H4n handy recorder using the XLR cables. That is something that, for example, I have used in short film festivals around the world, and working with other professional video producers. So really good equipment here. You're very lucky.
Okay.
I suppose it could be an element of both. So as with anything, you've got to start somewhere, so I'd always recommend spending a lot of time looking at YouTube videos on how best to capture sound and how to edit that. Speak to people you know who have done a good job and ask them if they can give you some advice, or even spend some time with you showing you how to do things. But as with anything, the more you practice it, the better you get. So you've got to have some kind of background knowledge on it. Which is why I'd recommend reading up on it, or coming to find me and ask me questions or something like that. But absolutely always practice. Sound is probably the single most crucial thing in film, so if you can get that right, then you're... Make sure you always wear headphones when you're actually doing the recording, because you want to be able to shut off everything else that's around you so you can focus on only what is going to be on that recording rather than just background noise. Make sure you do it in a quiet place. As much as possible, you want to be able to control the sound. So for example, if you're outside, if you're using a shotgun mic, and you can arrange your subjects so that they have something cushioned behind them, so maybe a forest or something like that, it's going to create a much more accurate and dead sound than if you were to point it towards the air where aeroplanes and birds are flying past, or there's a motorway or something like that. So have a think about your surroundings. Always wear headphones. When it comes to editing, make sure you sit yourself in a quiet room with either a decent pair of studio headphones or some good studio monitors like in here. Listen back to it on repeat, put it on a loop, and try and play around with the equalisation and really draw out the sound of what it is you want to hear.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, but again, as with most things, I'd say it takes a lot of practice. You want to start with something relatively straightforward and then work your way up towards the kind of higher end of things. So I wouldn't sit you in a recording studio and ask you to record a full live band before I'd asked you to try and record some vocals individually and have a look at how those work. So if you were recording music, for example, that would be how I'd start. When it comes to film, it can be more straightforward, but it can also be more complicated. So take a look at the situation that you have, think what's the easiest way to get the best results possible, and go down that route. That's what I'd recommend.
So that's kind of what we've done by having those 6 technical lessons and got our skills up and made a production.
Well, I remember that particular scene because the subject was quite far away. They were in a big open space. It's not that difficult to create a good piece of sound using something as simple as just the H4n on its own with the attached microphones. If you wanted to get a really, really crisp form of audio, then the best thing you could do would be to go into the recording studio room, completely dead room, and record into a condenser microphone, into a computer, and then edit that on audio specific editing software, then put it into Final Cut, add it to your video. But because it's such a unsubstantial kind of piece of audio that you needed, it's not essential that you went to do that. You were able to achieve the results that you wanted to just recording in a room. But I'm fairly sure you made sure that you had curtains behind the subject, so that would deaden sound, keep it a bit more clear. So reverb, maybe a slight bit of echo, because I'm fairly sure they're on a train platform, so to add a bit of, I don't know, the lights have just gone on. gone. So you've got to make sure it's a decent quality recording, so use some proper equipment. I'd recommend removing your microphone a little bit away from your subject to encourage a microphone to pick up some room ambience, and that's useful in terms of creating audible space. And then also add a bit of reverb to the audio, add a bit of echo, because he was in a big wide open space in a train station, and that will make him sound further away. Also, you'll need to reduce the volume to make it sound like he's not right in your ear, but he's actually at a bit of a distance. You can also change the panning, which is the same as with a video pan. You can pan your audio and make it sound like it comes from the left or the right. Try and point that in the direction of your subject to make it a bit more accurate. Condenser microphones, which are what you typically see in a recording studio, are great for recording very close up, but you would use those more specifically for ADR or for recording vocals for music or something like that. If you're trying to make it seem live or you're recording on location, then for close-up you might want to use just the coincidental pair on the front of the H4n handy recorder. And if they're a bit further away, you might want to use a shotgun mic, but ideally you'll have the microphone as close to the subject as you possibly can anyway, because otherwise it's just going to pick up everything, and it's going to be hard to use that audio. If you wanted to add background noise, then just set the Zoom H4n up somewhere and just record for a couple of minutes, just whatever's going on, crowd noise or wildlife or something like that. You can have a really useful bit of ambient audio to cut into your video that way.
Thank you very much to our media technician, Mr. Lyman, for talking to us about sound.